We know as we age, we get this phenomenon that happens. It's called anabolic resistance. And anabolic resistance is a natural occurring physiological happening where the tissue, the muscle tissue, becomes resistant to protein. So it actually takes more quality protein for the effect on the muscle, for the muscle to recognize the protein. And that's something naturally that happens. So when we're younger, and when I say younger, I mean 30s and 40s, and we begin to adapt and adopt a new way of eating, of just augmenting protein, you then keep the skeletal muscle healthy.
Welcome to the Betty Rocker Show, the place to be to nourish your mind, love your body, and rock your life. Welcome back, Rockstar. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It's great to have you here. You know, so many of the women I talk to who are working on getting fit and strong are really wanting a toned body. But key to tone is muscle tone. And, you know, no matter what goal you have, the bottom line is that adding and preserving your muscle is one of the keys to longevity, strength, and really your ability to thrive as you go through time. And this is really something that I've been more and more conscious of as I've been in my 40s. And in today's show, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon sits down and discusses muscle-centric medicine and a new way to look at our body composition. She says it's not that we're over fat, it's that we're actually under muscled. So when you learn some of the amazing things that muscle actually does, I think you'll agree that optimizing it through the way you work your 4 pillars of health and the way that you work with your doctor is an essential awareness piece to have and will really, really support you. So here's a little bit more about Dr. Lyon. She is a Washington University fellowship trained physician in nutritional science and geriatrics and is a board certified in family medicine and osteopathic manipulation. She works closely with the Special Operations Military as part of the Task Force Dagger Foundation, and she has a private practice in New York City. Dr. Lyon leverages evidence-based medicine and emerging cutting-edge science to restore metabolism, balance hormones, and optimize body composition with the goal of a lifetime of vitality. So join me in welcoming today's amazing guest to our show. Dr. Lyon, it is such a thrill to get to sit down and actually talk to you in person. How lucky are we to get to be hanging out together?
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's so good that you're here. And for those of you listening, if I haven't mentioned this before, Dr. Lyon is actually my doctor. So getting the opportunity to work with someone who is so science-based and so well-educated, who cares so much about her patients. Yeah. It's my secret sauce, basically. So it's such an honor to get to actually interview you today.
I'm so excited that I get to be the one to take care of you.
Oh, you're the best. Now, for people listening, one of the things that a lot of people don't quite have an understanding of, which I never used to either, is the difference between functional medicine and integrated. Would you just break it down for us? What's the difference? And why is there this discrepancy between quote unquote normal doctors and functional medicine doctors?
So that's a really interesting question. The idea of functional medicine is actually very different than the idea of traditional Western medicine. So Western medicine is very injury-based treatment or symptom-based treatment. For example, maybe you were fatigued or you couldn't sleep. I would offer you an Ambien. That would be an example of Western medicine. Functional medicine or integrative medicine, it's interesting. So functional medicine is standardized. There is a Functional Medicine Institute, and that's really about root cause medicine. And it's saying, man, there's a reason you're not sleeping, or there's a reason you're gaining weight. I'm not going to just tell you to, exercise more and eat less. So it's really, again, that root cause approach.
I hear from so many of my women, and we've talked about this on the show before, about how they just get prescribed a pill because their symptoms of hormone imbalance, for example, are being dismissed and they're just being prescribed something. So I love the approach of functional medicine because, from my understanding, am I correct? There's a training, there's just like more training that happens as a result, usually.
So functional medicine, typically people go into functional medicine after they've done some kind of traditional medicine. So for example, in my case, I did traditional medicine for many years. And then on the side, also trained with functional medicine.
And it's a lot of training.
Yes, it can be. Yeah. Functional medicine can be. It just depends on how you integrate it.
Integrated. I like that word a lot because I feel like that's when you're treating root cause, you have to look at the body as a whole.
Totally.
You have to look at all of these different systems and how they talk to each other. And that's why I think I was harping on it's a lot of training, because you must have to understand a lot more about the body. And every functional doctor that I've spoken to has said so much more about nutrition than I ever heard from a regular MD. And that makes me really happy and excited to get to work with someone, because I feel, food is medicine, our sleep is a doctor, all these things in our 4 pillars of health are so essential for our well-being.
And I think you bring up a really good point. It's on the physician. It's the physician's responsibility to do their work and to do their training. So for example, I trained 7 years in nutritional sciences.
Wow.
See, which is a lot. I mean, I really put in the time because it matters and it's so important. I did my undergraduate in nutritional sciences, and then I did a fellowship at WashU in obesity medicine and nutrition.
Right.
And that was another 2 years. So I think it's really on the physician to be able to take that knowledge and integrate it, because it is so important.
And then you're very science-based.
Yes.
You're constantly referencing scientific articles, and you're also really a great educator to the public about when the science hasn't been very sciencey.
Which is funny, right?
It's funny and terrible.
So I really do, and this is really from my mentors. I've been trained by some of the world-leading scientists, and I'm very fortunate. Part of that training, what's so interesting, is the aspect of medicine and the aspect of nutrition. But the other thing is intellectual integrity. Mm-hmm. And I believe that is also what I've been taught. So you have to, as a healthcare provider, say, here, this is the evidence. And then here's the art of practicing medicine. So it's a blending of the best of both worlds.
Right. And in order to blend the best of both worlds, you actually need good research, correct scientific protocol. There's a lot of skewed results out there that the public isn't really aware of. And you do just a great job in your public presentation of your practice because you're a great educator. If you guys haven't checked out her Instagram, for example, very good information constantly being shared there. And you're just such a great educator in that way, about not just about here's what I'm teaching you, but also here's why I'm teaching you this.
Totally.
Here's what's behind why I'm teaching you this.
It's so important. It's the most important piece that people have.
It is.
And they owe it to themselves to have that education. And it's so confusing. We live in information overload.
Yes. And this is one of the reasons I love that you're my doctor, because you've taken this vast array of data about my body and simplified it for me. And you give me such a structured way to approach it. And I'm never worried. I'm never scared.
No.
I'm always just like really interested and intrigued and excited to do whatever it is we're doing, whether it's a supplement protocol or we're treating something specifically or looking at my diet. These are all aspects that help give me the edge.
Totally. And you have to think about, what is the long-term trajectory?
Right.
We're going to work today so that later on everything is exactly how you want it.
And then you have people who come to you who have very serious health conditions.
Totally.
And you have to almost work backwards. Yeah. So one of the interesting things in your practice that has stood out to me, I think you might have trademarked this term, is you should.
I did.
Good.
I actually did.
I like that because it's, when I heard it, I was just like, it was like a light bulb went off in my head when I heard muscle-centric medicine and that you say, I believe that it's not that we're over fat, but that we're under muscled. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. What a brilliant concept. Yeah. Could you explain a little bit about that concept for us?
So that was actually born from just years of seeing patient after patient and really seeing issues with obesity. And there came a moment, and we're just going to call this woman Sarah. We're going to make up her name. And I was at WashU and we were doing studies on brain imaging. So obesity and brain imaging. And we imaged her brain and she was 50s. And there was a lot of flattening of, the structures. And it was largely related to her nutrition. And it was at that moment. So it's really the wider the waistline, it affects brain volume. And it was at that second that I realized that it wasn't this issue of adiposity or being over fat. It was truly about being under muscled, because had she had proper body composition, had she had known about it, it would have completely changed the trajectory of her brain, her aging, everything.
Now, I don't know how old the research is, or it feels like it's more recent, where we've learned that the muscle is actually an endocrine organ. So can you explain how that works and what it does? Because I feel like that plays into this.
It totally does. So the concept of muscle-centric medicine is that muscle is the largest organ in the body. And it's actually an endocrine organ, which means when you contract it, as in exercise. That's right. You're very good at this.
I'm contracting my bicep in case you guys aren't
you're
watching.
Very good at this. It actually secretes things called myokines. And myokines travel throughout the body and have anti-inflammatory effects. They have brain regenerative effects. So skeletal muscle is not purely for locomotion or looking good in a bikini, but it truly is this high-powered, highly evolved endocrine organ. And by optimizing that is the secret to well-being and health.
Over the course of our lifetime, especially, right?
Absolutely. What is so interesting about it is there is an interplay between exercise and immunology. Especially right now, people are very concerned about their immune health. Exercise actually helps amplify. When you contract skeletal muscle, it helps augment your immune system because of what it secretes.
Right. And also, of course, we know that muscle or exercise impacts our insulin sensitivity.
It does.
It has so many other benefits to our body and
it's an endocrine organ.
It's an endocrine organ.
It's our metabolic currency.
Yes.
As you were talking about contracting muscle, it's very interesting. One aspect that people don't think about is that actually the secretion of these myokines cause nutrient partitioning. What that means...
Oh, yes. I'm so glad you brought up nutrient partitioning. So interesting.
What that means is that the contracting muscle, yes, it utilizes glucose, but it does something else. It actually directs the body to use fat, where to store carbohydrates, what is released. It actually changes body composition, not by the exercise itself, but by the myokines that are secreted and then cause nutrient partitioning. So for example, if you train, say you had an overnight fast and you train in a low glycogen state, which simply means that the glucose stored in your body is low, you actually will secrete more what's called interleukin-6, which is one of the myokines, which will then improve fat utilization.
Interesting. So this is why there's all this noise about fasted cardio, for instance.
I think that it's possible. And the science is still catching up.
Right. And in the meantime, whether you train, if you haven't eaten yet or you have eaten yet, I would think you would tell me, listen to how your energy feels, breathe, do what feels right for your body. Don't just blindly follow any diet out there.
I would absolutely say do not follow any diet out there. I would say let's take a look at your history, your labs, what you've done well with, what you haven't. And then I would say if we really want to move the needle, we have to get very granular.
Right. And now when we come to the granular conversation, I want to talk about protein because you have been my go-to reference for so long because protein is something that is so poorly understood.
True.
And so demonized by women. And we don't understand how important it is because we've seen it and we think, oh, it's for bodybuilders or it's for guys, right? And just like we have testosterone too, we also need protein.
We do.
And talk to us a little bit about why protein is so essential.
Well, protein is the most important macronutrient. And if we think that muscle, and we truly believe that muscle is the organ of longevity, interestingly, it's stimulated two ways. Skeletal muscle is stimulated by, number one, dietary protein. Mm-hmm. Getting the correct amounts per meal, a bolus amount, which we'll talk about. And number two, exercise. particularly resistance exercise. Muscle as not only an endocrine organ and an immune organ, but as a metabolic currency, meaning it determines everything about our body composition, plays a role in our resting metabolic rate, our baseline metabolism. Dietary protein stimulates muscle. And by getting, for example, 30 grams of dietary protein per meal, it will allow for optimizing, well, maybe not optimizing, but stimulating muscle protein synthesis. And why I think this is so important for your listeners is that oftentimes people eat sub-threshold amounts of protein.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I see this all the time.
Right.
And I get a lot of pushback initially about, you want me to have a high protein diet. And I'm like, no, I want you to have a balanced diet that includes an appropriate amount of protein.
Right.
Because you don't blink an eye when I say do this 30-day challenge.
Exactly.
We're all about the exercise component, but we need the education about how the nutrition supports the exercise so that we can make those choices for ourselves.
Totally. And did you know that the body replaces 300 grams of protein a day?
Yes, I know that we don't store it because we don't have a storage tank like we have in our liver and our muscles for glycogen from carbohydrates, from glucose. So we have to continually replenish the amino acids. So
it's highly utilized.
Something I wanted to ask you about. I've read some of your material and I know that there are 3 really important amino acids. Can you tell us what they are and how we can get them?
Yes. So number 1 is leucine. Leucine. So first, let me start off by saying there are essential and non-essential amino acids. And what that means is essential amino acids you have to get from your diet versus non-essential amino acids your body can make it. Of the essential amino acids, it's the branch chains. When we're really thinking about optimizing body composition and just even utilizing fat, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Those have to be ingested. And typically high quality protein sources are where those come from. And if you get leucine, which is an essential amino acid, correct, per meal, you then stimulate muscle tissue.
So it's so important to be paying attention to the quantity of our protein, but also the quality of our protein.
Yes, it is, especially as women are aging and struggling with body composition. It is really essential to make sure that those essential amino acids are ingested appropriately.
Right. And I know there are 9 essential amino acids that we can't make on our own, but you're saying these 3 are really essential for muscle.
Yes, in particular for body composition. And those come in high quality protein sources. They are high in whey protein. They're high in chicken, red meats, even eggs are considered high quality protein.
Are there supplements that people can take that if they're not eating, if they're plant-based, for example?
Branch chain amino acids and a scoop of 5 grams of creatine, they will be perfect.
Great. Really helpful.
It's very important. And so for my vegan or vegetarian patients, we always augment with 5 grams of amino acids, of branch chain amino acids, and 5 grams of creatine.
Oh, that's really helpful. Because I think some of us, it might not be even that we're plant-based, but we just end up having variety throughout our day. So I feel like it's helpful to have a supplement protocol to add to what you're eating.
And it's not easy to eat protein. Nobody wants to have another chicken breast. And that's actually in the literature. It's very difficult. In a lot of the studies, have very hard time women meeting protein requirements.
It is. And I remember when I first wrote the Body Fuel System years ago, I made each of the macronutrients an Avengers character, of course.
I love that.
And protein is Captain America because he's at the head of the team.
Right.
And protein is, I just was like, I put protein powder in muffins. I put it in desserts. I was putting it in all of these things, just low impact. You don't even notice it's there. But I would get a lot of pushback from my readers saying like, do I have to use the protein powder? I'm like, no, you don't have to, but I really think you should.
Yeah.
And this is great information to hear from a doctor with as much training and science as you have in your milieu, shall we say?
Yes.
And you're really helping me to explain and also understand even more deeply how important all of this is. I personally, some days really struggle to get enough protein in. And I'm like, at the end of my day, I'm like, that's the one so I don't normally track my macros.
Right.
I tend to be a more intuitive eater. But part of why I'm able to be more intuitive is because at different times in my life, I have learned about the foods I'm eating. I have a general sense of how much they have in them.
Right.
But the one macro I'm always thinking about the grams of is my protein. That's how I start my plate or start my meal. So if I get to the end of my day and I'm like, I've only had 80 grams of protein, I need another at least 20 grams to make, my baseline. I'll have like a chocolate protein shake, or I'll take a frozen banana, stick it in my food processor with a scoop of chocolate protein, a little bit of almond milk, and I've got nice cream. Protein nice cream. And I'm like, this really is funny. Great.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Protein has a lot of other effects. It actually improves satiation.
Yes.
Which means people are much less likely, and there's tons of studies about this. And there's something called the protein leverage hypothesis.
Ooh.
And it is by a guy named Simpson. He is a scientist, very well respected. And it's this concept that all animals, that this is preserved through species, that they will feed, obviously, as long as that they do eat protein, they will feed to reach a certain protein threshold. And they believe, his group believes, that one of the causes of obesity is the continual feeding to actually reach that protein goal. For example, if people were eating just quinoa, they would continue to feed until they meet that percentage of protein.
One of the things I had learned when I was doing my research for my book was that our body basically knows when it's full, either by volume, literally you can't eat more, or stuffed, or by nutrient density. So this is what you're saying. This is why you'll be eating those Oreos and you simply can't stop.
Correct.
Because, well, A, the sugar's tricking your brain, but then B, your body's still looking for nutrients.
Correct.
So this is one of the reasons why eating a lot of foods with added sugar can be really damaging, because those empty calories are not satisfying you, right?
And it's a high palatability.
Right. High palatability. So we're wired to want pleasure. And
that's right.
Right.
That's right. So it's very interesting, by eating protein first, by eating protein forward, you are much less likely to overeat.
I love the protein forward approach.
Yep.
You are a doctor who is, from my experience, extremely proactive in everything you do. You're always looking for, how can we make this the long game approach? Yep. This is not just short term. We want to really look ahead. So I love how there's all these concepts that are really proactive in what you teach.
I mean, think about it. I have the privilege to take care of people, to allow them to be the best version of themselves. So I can help them remove the obstacles.
Right.
And it's my responsibility.
And you're working with a lot of high performers, high achievers. You have a history of working with a lot of SEALs.
I do. And I still do to this day.
Yes.
Yep.
Tell us
Olympians,
a little bit. Tell us a little
Olympians.
bit about some of the things that stand out from those types of people who are athletic or high achievers, or
I would say it's mindset. The biggest thing is that they are willing to implement our plan. And there's no negative self-talk. That's really taken off the table. This is the plan. We know this is going to get better. Here's what we're doing for this month. Here's the next plan, and it allows for improvement.
I was just secretly in my head, did I do all those things? Checking them off. I'm like, yeah, that was exactly what I did.
I have a very particular kind of patient, and if we put them all in a room together, they would all get along.
Yeah, we would.
Yeah. It's a
sense.
Very particular kind of personality.
There's something you said in there that just really stands out to me that I want to highlight. It's about, they don't have negative self-talk. Correct. Now, this is something that can take first years to just be aware that we have. Mm-hmm. And then there's how do I reconcile the fact that, well, I don't like how I look today, so I'm just going to beat myself up about it like today. And it's hard to let go of. What are some of the impacts that type of stress has on us?
It really limits the ability to get better. It pushes cortisol up. It creates a dysregulation. So all that time and energy that you could be putting towards your dreams, you're putting towards negative self-talk, which increases inflammation. It increases inflammatory markers.
Which decreases your muscle.
And increases glucose.
Right.
And then your sleep is affected. It's really at the core. Truly is at the core.
So it all comes from within. I hear this over and over.
Listen, so it all does come from within, but you have to have a qualified physician.
Right.
So it does come from within, and then you you have a corner man, a quarterback.
That is
like, hey, I got you. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to take care of you. We're going to do this together. And here's our plan. And it's all about communication. It's all about trust. And really, you just see improvements, because at some point, everybody's going to need a physician.
It's true. And
no matter how great you're doing, I take care of CEOs, which we have mutual friends, the SEALs, no matter what, no matter how good a person is, you need to have a quarterback.
Yeah. We all really need somebody in our corner, and someone who will I mean, I hear a lot of women, we've talked about this so much, just they're not able to advocate for themselves and for what they need because we trust our doctors. We trust, that's why at the beginning of this, I wanted you to define what is the difference actually. And if you're not getting your needs met from the doctor that you're seeing, or you feel like they're not advocating for your best, or they're dismissing you in some way, keep looking.
And there's something that's really important. There has to be a good relationship. And I always try really hard up front to set the tone for that. You have to trust me, and I have to trust that you're going to execute, and that if you don't feel comfortable with something, then we have a conversation about it. That is at the core. It's so important.
Yeah, that trust is really important. And I think that all starts from within the patient themselves, right? Like so there was something interesting as we were looking through my charts recently. You showed me a number that was like, I can tell with this number if someone is actually not being honest with me about their nutrition. This shows me certain markers. And I found that really interesting because a lot of the times we downplay the things that we're doing
always
that are not optimal for us because we just don't want to deal with that. And we're actually doing those things out of a feedback stress loop. And until we can address some of that, then we can start to get a little bit more honest with ourselves about why we're doing that, and then hopefully work towards eliminating that kind of that behavior. Because it's one thing to, for example, so let's take eating cookies or sweets or something that a lot of us can relate to. It's one thing to enjoy the cookies, the sweets, the desserts on purpose because you're with friends, you're in a moment, you're having fun. It's another thing to be uncontrollably eating them every time you get stressed. And that feels like that has a double whammy impact on you. Not only is it impacting the sugars impacting you, like we just talked about, but then the stress of having that uncontrollable urge that you then feel guilty about afterwards and you want to lie to your doctor about, that's got to be super damaging.
Yeah, totally. And it damages the relationship, but it also, then the patient becomes very frustrated.
Right.
So there has to be an awareness of, what are the people really doing? What are you really doing? So actually just having data is super helpful because it then becomes non-emotional.
So we have to be willing to, so first we have to have a doctor we can trust.
Totally.
And then we have to be a patient the doctor can trust. We have to be willing to really give true information, and we have to sort of detach ourselves from the attachment to what we think that says about us as people if we're doing certain things, right? We have to just be super honest. Here's what's happening. Here's what I'm doing.
And having a high quality plan and a program in place. We talked about protein.
Yes.
Protein is the most important macronutrient. It's essential. We need it to maintain our muscle tissue.
Right.
We need it to maintain our organs. Our liver replaces itself every 2 to 3 days.
It's amazing. Speaking of all of these systems and how they talk to each other, I think a lot about hormone health and hormone balance. And I know that there are different receptors for different hormones in the muscle tissue, correct? Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
It's very interesting. A lot of the science as it relates to female hormones is relatively new.
Of course, because they were doing all the tests on men for so long, right?
Because many of the researchers were men.
Right.
It is very interesting to see that, for example, thyroid. Thyroid is so important in actually muscle tissue and glucose metabolism, which people don't really think about a lot. There is a transporter. It's called GLUT4. And GLUT4 is what takes glucose from the blood into the skeletal muscle. And if your thyroid is low, you don't express enough GLUT4. That's where, in one aspect where a lot of women gain weight with thyroid issues. And that's just one aspect. And there's progesterone and estrogen. And while all these hormones are new in terms of the science as it relates to muscle, we know how important testosterone is for muscle tissue.
We sure do. We've recently discovered in our work together, I'll share this because, it's my show. I want to tell you guys what's going on with me and what I'm doing about it so you can learn and have insights. But I discovered that my testosterone was low. And obviously there were other things we were looking at as well, but that gave me a lot of insight as to why I had been adding, body fat and losing muscle. And for me, this was a subtle process because, of course, I had been really working my 4 pillars consistently. And I think I've shared with you what those are. Sleep, nutrition, stress management, exercise. So I find that when I'm really optimizing those 4 areas, which I feel I can have control over in some degree, it creates more resilience in my body, which is why this is why it took over a year for me to even notice I'm losing muscle and I'm gaining fat. Like, you think at first it's just a small thing and you think it'll go away in a week or two or a month, or you think it's your period, or you think it's your something else. But I was like, wow, there's really something going on here. It took a while to notice, but I'm glad, because I know I'm going to bounce back quickly because of my resilience, because of those 4 pillars, because of lifestyle practices that are already in place.
Yep. And that's really important as you think about it. There are some things that we can have direct impact for, or on. And then there are some aspects like hormonal health that there's no issue with getting help. Right?
We need a doctor for these things.
You just do.
It's
really important to balance it.
Yeah.
And then you combined good hormonal health with an appropriate nutrition strategy, which is about optimizing protein and then managing carbohydrates per meal. There is a carbohydrate threshold, which is really, if you're looking for weight loss, anything over 30 to 40 grams, that's kind of safe zone. So 40 grams or less of carbohydrates per meal is a good sweet spot.
That's really helpful. So you started out by saying at the beginning of this that about 30 grams of protein per meal was a good range.
It's a good starting place.
A good starting place, especially if you're primarily eating about 3 meals a day. That would put you around the 90 gram range. We'd probably need a little more, so we'd have a protein shake in the mix.
Or you could increase to 40 grams of protein per meal.
Or you could increase.
If your listeners just did that, increase their protein to 40 grams if they were having 3 meals a day, so that's 120 grams of protein. Reduce their carbohydrate intake so they meet a threshold of, say, 40 grams or less, body composition will change.
Per meal. Yeah. And then, what you were talking about before about satiety. I never know. Do I say it? You say
Satiety.
Satiated, and then you say satiety.
Totally.
So the T changes in the word.
Yep.
And I want to go back to talking about T in particular in a second, but I think that's a really great guideline and really helpful. So when we were talking about satiety, we were talking about how protein is the most satiating of the macronutrients. So if we start with protein and then we're like, okay, and this is approximately how much carbohydrates, especially from whole food sources, not sugar sources, whole food sources. And then the fat kind of makes up itself. We don't need a lot of it.
That's absolutely correct. And by doing those practices, the body will fall into line.
Right.
Protein has this kind of natural shutoff mechanism. And then if you're really hungry and you say, okay, go have a chicken breast, and then you're like, nah, I don't want it. Not really hungry. And it's really important because as you manage body composition through age, this is when you prevent diseases of aging. Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes of the brain, right? It's sugar dysregulation. You have to manage that through body composition, through muscle, hypertension, heart disease. These are all body composition issues. Of course, there's some genetic component, but by managing and optimizing muscle, you prevent the trajectory of aging in this way.
Wow. It's really a revolutionary concept when you think about it. I mean, and it really took a doctor and a scientist, to go in together to sort of look at what's wrong here. I love that epiphany you shared that you had it when you were at Wash U. And the woman that you were looking at.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself,
had she known this?
So if you look at society, we are constantly focusing on obesity. We are focusing on the wrong tissue.
Everybody wants to know how to lose fat.
It's the wrong approach. Adipose tissue and fat tissue happens later. The issues have been going on and defects in the muscle have been happening for years before. So what actually happens is if your muscle is like a suitcase and you fill it with glycogen or you've filled it with substrate, it spills back over into the bloodstream and then your blood sugar goes up. Or if you don't have healthy muscle, you can't utilize the glucose that you're eating.
Right. So your body has no choice but to store it in your fat cells.
Yes. But that comes much later. It comes through the destruction and the inability to have healthy muscle. So it's a secondary response. So if we go way back to when we were talking about Western medicine and functional medicine, if we really believe in root cause medicine is about treating the skeletal muscle.
And optimizing its production.
100%.
Right.
Because we know as we age, we get this phenomenon that happens. It's called anabolic resistance. And anabolic resistance is a natural occurring physiological happening where the muscle tissue becomes resistant to protein. So it actually takes more quality protein for the effect on the muscle, for the muscle to recognize the protein. And that's something naturally that happens. So when we're younger, and when I say younger, I mean 30s and 40s, and we begin to adapt and adopt a new way of eating, of just augmenting protein, you then keep the skeletal muscle healthy.
Amazing. I keep thinking in my head about testosterone because we just touched on it.
Yep.
And as women, it's like protein. We sort of just think, well, that's for men, right?
Right. But actually we need it for healthy sex drive.
Yep.
Muscle tissue.
That's
probably the most, and actually helps with bone health.
Right. And so that's why when we found out that my testosterone was low, that was a big indicator of one of the reasons you are losing muscle is your T is very low.
It was profound in our face that we have to fix this.
Right.
And we can fix it.
Right.
And it often occurs with aging. And, maybe there's other things. Maybe there's environmental effects that create a cascade, whatever it is. But by focusing on testosterone and skeletal muscle for women, it's really not a taboo issue. And it really optimizes body composition.
Right. So as we go through the course of our life cycle as women, we have, if we looked at just the big three, we look at estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone.
Yep.
What happens from basically puberty to perimenopause to menopause? How do those shift, and when should we be paying attention?
Interestingly, people do pretty well for most of their life. You get to 30, your testosterone is high, your estrogen is good, your progesterone is good. And then all of a sudden, depending on your lifestyle or stress, there's this perimenopause window. And that can last, perimenopause is described, the time around menopause, which is the cease of menstruation for a year. And it really is individual dependent. And what you start to see happen is testosterone decreases, thyroid often decreases, and of course, estrogen and progesterone. It's like this big happy storm of all hormones begin to decrease. This is of course individual, because there are times where estrogen maintains itself.
Right.
And depending on the woman, estrogen maintains itself. You see a dip in testosterone and a dip in progesterone. And one of the first signs is people are having a lot of anxiety and they can't sleep. So I often see that as people are in the perimenopausal window. And then menopause, weight gain happens almost instantaneously. And it's interesting. It is oftentimes that change in estrogen, which actually changes metabolism.
Right.
We become less capable to deal with carbohydrates.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about that. That's very interesting.
It's very interesting. And again, the science is new, but there is an effect of estrogen on glucose metabolism. And it actually affects and decreases glucose metabolism. And there is an insulin resistant component that also happens with muscle. So around menopause, women, it's notoriously gain weight.
Yep. It's one of the biggest complaints and concerns that I hear about in my Rock Your Life membership community. And a lot of the time what women are being told and what they're doing to themselves, I'll say that really specifically, is they feel like they need to exercise more. So they're taking 2 challenges at a time. They're doing extra stuff and they're eating less, which is making them have more cravings. They're still not sleeping right.
Affecting cortisol.
Cortisol. Yep.
That also has a negative effect on thyroid. So the reverse T3 goes up. So a lot of my menopausal women, perimenopausal women, we move very swiftly to hormones, because the longer you wait, the more difficult it becomes to treat. And it doesn't mean that you have to go on high doses. It becomes a moderate to low dose to maintain functioning.
Totally. And this is exactly what we talked about in my last visit with you. Yep. Is about I feel like I may have entered perimenopause even in my late 30s. I think it might have, but I don't know for sure. I just know that I think I'm in it now and that we've caught this early and that we're doing very simple things, looking at the low testosterone. And it was great to see how many other things were actually in a good place for me.
Yeah, they were.
Right? But that gives me confidence. And because we're being so specific about what we're treating, we can now continue to monitor as I go through time.
Any of my patients will tell you I am very rigid on getting blood work and data. It's really important.
Regularly, not just one time.
No.
Because it's a snapshot of your blood work in time.
Yes. And oftentimes the patient will tell you how they're feeling.
Right.
it's very interesting, the change in metabolism that happens perimenopause and menopause. And that's the time to also change exercise. High intensity interval training and really putting in that effort really has a positive impact on body composition during that time because it improves insulin sensitivity.
If you're feeling like your energy is dropping, then obviously we want to have people do a little less cardio. But I say that with a caveat because what that is an indicator of is we need to get something else checked out. We need to get something optimized, right?
Yes.
It's not just that, and because you need to do it and it will be effective for you when your hormones are optimized.
Yes. And often overlooked is thyroid.
Often overlooked is thyroid, right?
People, when they talk about hormones, they really focus on the sex hormones.
Right.
Thyroid is so important for body composition because of that effect on GLUT4, skeletal muscle, and metabolism, energy usage. One of the things that I see for, say, for example, Hashimoto's, which is an immune destruction of the thyroid, is people have migrating joint pain. Or they have, and of course you see that in Lyme, but you have inflammation in different tissues. So those are all things that kind of can happen around perimenopause.
I love that you suggested that more high-intensity interval training is beneficial during that time. It's great because a lot of my women are in the similar age range to me. They're like 35 to 55 is our general age range. So they're all either coming up on this experience or in the experience or just past the experience and still dealing with symptoms. I was wondering, are there any specific things that we can educate people to be asking their doctor to check for them?
That's a fantastic question. Certainly a hormone literate doctor is important. So you definitely want a full thyroid panel. And that's really important. Testosterone, obviously the estrogen, sex hormone binding globulin, really, fasting insulin is also really important. So, I think just not getting the basic screening is important. But I think also the people listening, your listeners, are more literate in functional medicine and really wanting more advanced care.
Yes, I'm encouraging them all to seek this kind of thing. And it's helpful because now telemedicine is a lot more available. So if there's, I know you have a telemedicine practice. We just happen to be in the same place. We got to see each other in person. But generally it's telemedicine, and there are some limitations with telemedicine. Can you explain a little bit about that for us?
I typically insist that I see all patients in person for the first visit. I have patients all over the world. It is very important to be able to have contact. There's an energy component. I know it sounds weird.
No, it doesn't at all.
But I need to see your eyes. I need to see your skin. I have to see you. It's important because the art of medicine is valuable. And the art of medicine comes from contact.
And human beings are complex.
Incredibly complex.
And it's just so much about, I think about the different dynamics of our energy from day to day and how we present ourselves. And I feel like it's a lot easier to discern sort of intangibles about someone.
Of course.
When you're in person with them.
Of course.
That's why I insist on any calls or meetings I have with someone new, if I'm interviewing them, be a face to camera video if it's remote.
And there's something to be said for being very good at being able to look at a person and look at their physicality. You can tell the whiteness of their eyes, the quality of their tongue, if they have cracked skin. All of this gives you a sense of vitamin deficiencies.
Hydration,
gut health.
Liver health, right? Can't you see liver in the eyeballs?
So there's all these really important attributes that happen when you are in person. But right now I am doing telemedicine. However, that is not my favorite thing to do. Sure. I really do enjoy meeting people face to face. It's important.
I enjoy meeting you face to face. It's important. It is. It's important. It's also an important part of the trust component that you talked about earlier. So really, I love this information you're sharing because I know that not everyone will be able to, use telemedicine as an option. People are limited because our country is very strange with its healthcare. People are going to have some limitations with their insurance, for example, with cost. And it's important that they're able to, if they have limited choices when it comes to what doctor they can work with, that they at least have the education. So they're empowered to be able to advocate for what they need.
It's very important to me. I put out a lot of content.
You do.
And I do that because I am very aware that everybody deserves the information.
Mm-hmm.
And I work very hard to be very trustworthy and credible. There is no confusion. If I know something is evidence-based, I love to share that. If it's my personal opinion, I'm completely transparent on that. I have a free protocol. You looked at my website.
I was literally just about to talk about
Yeah.
this amazing resource that even if you can't work with Dr. Lyon like I am, you can get so much valuable information from her. And there was this guide you have that I loved that goes in detail over the macros, talks a lot about protein, some of the things we covered, but it just goes over everything. And I love that. It's a free guide.
It is.
It's amazing.
And it took a lot of work to put together. I wanted
It's beautiful.
to put together something that was very valuable.
It's so valuable and it's free. And you can get it what's the website link? We'll put it in the show notes.
Yep, drgabriellelyon.com.
And
and I actually put a few things on there that was very interesting. I think understanding where someone came from is very important so you understand their perspective. And I have a section on there that says, meet my mentor. I am so fortunate to have been trained by one of the world leading experts in protein metabolism. He is very academic and certainly not, it's not from academic to public, right? You need an intermediate individual to be able to help teach that really great science. And I think it's really important for people to see all that information. And
I love that you
studies.
Included that about your mentor. It's Dr. Lehman, correct?
Yeah, it's just so important because the information, there's a gap. It takes 10 plus years for information from science to get out to the public. They actually say it takes about 17. In information in randomized controlled trials takes forever for it to actually become implemented. And I think that being able to communicate the recent studies that are coming out is very valuable for people.
It is very, I know as a follower of yours online, I'm always fascinated by you do live streams with really smart people. You're interviewing doctors and scientists.
Yes.
You are talking about this stuff yourself, solo episodes.
Yes.
You need a podcast.
I'm working on it. I have a little daughter. So,
yes, you do.
And a full practice.
An amazing, yes. And you have a lot going on.
Yes.
And you put so much great information and content out there on your social media and on your website. And there's so many free resources that people can utilize to educate themselves. But of course, we always want more because you're brilliant. And I could talk to you for 5 days and feel like I still didn't learn everything I want to know, And then it's interesting and important to take these things in bite-sized chunks and integrate them into your day and think about them and think about small changes that you might be able to make yourself and then slowly build over time on your knowledge base. And that's what I love about social media is that you're able to give it in these bite-sized chunks.
Yes.
Very valuable. Very, very valuable. Now I want to give you a chance to, if there's anything that I didn't ask you about specifically, anything you'd like to backtrack on or elaborate on, I always like to give my guests the last word. Is there something that we didn't talk about that you want to bring to light?
No, I think just understanding the importance of protein and realizing it's a meal distribution. It's a 30 to even 50 grams per meal, which is really on the higher end, but a minimum of 30 grams is where people are going to see appetite regulation as well as body composition improvement. And just by doing that one small change, people can change the trajectory of the way they age.
Of the way that they age. And I love that you mentioned body composition. I just want to touch on weight on the scale, I think, because we just glossed over it, but that's a huge issue that so many women deal with is they think, I want to be at my set point weight, and they're thinking about a weight in their 20s or when they're in college. And body composition is different than weight on the scale.
Right. Interestingly, body composition, we have all these charts for body fat percentage. In a perfect world, I would like to see charts for skeletal muscle percentage, which we don't really exist. I mean, they do in the aging populations, but they don't really exist. So body composition is the percent of body fat or muscle mass.
And I've been really disappointed to hear from some of my readers random comments made when they're getting weighed on the scale by the practitioners around them, or just making them feel like horrible about themselves because they feel like their weight is the only thing. And I feel like there's still like this attitude from a lot of healthcare practitioners that your weight and your BMI, these are like...
we don't even use BMI anymore.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that out loud. Yeah. So I appreciate that about the protein and also just letting me talk just that little PS side note about weight and body composition, because I think it's an important thing to stress for our women listeners, especially.
You should never do anything or be made to feel bad. Mm-mm. That's a complete waste of energy.
Complete waste of energy. We've talked about it a couple times. Like, we want to use our energy to learn, to empower ourselves, and to also share what we know with other women.
Yes.
And on the men in our lives too, because they need support too.
They do.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I am so grateful for you for taking the time to talk to us today. I hope that you'll come back again for a future episode.
Can't wait.
We loved having you. And for those of you who are looking to connect with Dr. Lyon, you can go to her website. It's
drgabriellelyon.com.
Love it. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Rockstar, for tuning in and listening. Remember, you can find Dr. Lyon's website, her social media, and her free guide, plus anything else we mentioned in the show, over on the show notes page at thebettyrocker.com/podcast. And you can also leave a comment or question there as well. And thank you so much for your awesome reviews of the show. It's really special to connect in this way with you, and it really means the world to me to read the reviews on iTunes. So if you have left something there, thank you so much. If you liked the show today and want to leave a review, just know that I read those all personally, and it really does help other people find the show, and I really appreciate it. Coming up next week, I'm bringing you the one and only Jen Esquer, Doctor of Physical Therapy, better known on Instagram as DocJenFit. She's an internationally renowned physical therapist who specializes in helping people overcome chronic pain and maximize physical performance, and she's got some great insights to share with you about supporting your body. I thought that since we just talked about all the great things our muscle does for us, it would be a great follow-up to talk about some of the other ways we can support our entire musculoskeletal system. So I look forward to sharing that conversation with you. So until next time, just remember, I'm Betty Rocker, and you are so awesome and amazing. I'll talk to you again real soon.
This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Brie Argetsinger, Betty Rocker Inc., and the producers disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. Before starting a new exercise, fitness, or health protocol, or if you think you have a medical problem, always consult a licensed physician.